Someone crossed you recently? Maybe it was calculated, they saw a gap and they stepped through it. Maybe it was casual, which is almost worse. Casual disrespect means they didn't even think you'd respond. They filed you away in a category. Soft. Manageable. Safe to disrespect without consequence. And you felt it. That hot crawl up the back of your neck. The moment right after, when your mind started composing the speech you'd never give. The explanation. The correction. The perfectly worded response that would make them see what they'd done. You rehearsed it in the shower. On the drive home. At 2 a.m. when you should have been sleeping. You never delivered it. Here's the thing nobody tells you, that instinct, to explain, to defend, to make them understand, that instinct is the most expensive mistake a man can make. Not because speaking is weak, but because explaining is begging. And the moment you beg someone to understand why they should respect you, you've already answered the question they were silently asking. This is about something older and colder than that. This is about what men who've actually held power have always known, and what most men raised on fairness and logic were never taught. You don't correct people who disrespect you. You make them realize slowly, over time, that they have made a strategic error. #the confession hidden in every explanation. There's a man at your office. Maybe in your family. Maybe someone you considered a friend until last month. He challenged you, publicly or privately, it doesn't matter, and you felt the pull. The immediate, almost physical urge to set the record straight. To show him your reasoning. To prove, with evidence, that you're not what he implied. Watch that urge carefully. Study it the way you'd study a wound. Because what lives inside that urge is fear. Not fear of him, fear of being misunderstood. Fear that if you don't speak, the narrative becomes permanent. Fear that silence equals agreement, and agreement means he was right. That fear is the lever he's already pulling without knowing it. Every time you explain yourself to someone who challenged you, you're handing them a document. That document says, your opinion of me matters enough to change my behavior, and once a man has that document in his hands, he will use it again. Not out of malice necessarily. Out of instinct. The way water finds the crack it found before. People learn how to treat you not from what you say, but from what you tolerate, and what you respond to. You can give a speech about respect. You can correct the record with perfect logic. And the person who challenged you will nod, perhaps apologize, perhaps even feel genuine remorse. And then, 6 weeks later, they will test the same boundary in a slightly different way. Because your response taught them that the boundary is made of words, and words can always be answered with more words. The men who are rarely crossed are not the men with the best arguments. They're the men whose reactions, or deliberate non-reactions, carved something into the memory of everyone around them. Something that says, this particular move costs more than it returns. You don't arrive at that through explanation. You arrive there through the slow, patient work of consequences. #what silence actually does to a room. Most men think silence is the absence of power. They've been taught that the man who speaks commands the room. Dominant, vocal, filling the space. Spend a week observing high-pressure rooms and that theory collapses. The loudest person is almost never the most dangerous. The loudest person is performing, which means they need the room's attention to feel real. Attention dependence is a vulnerability. And everyone in that room, on some level, feels it. Watch the man who speaks less. The one who lets others complete their sentences, their arguments, their whole complicated bid for status, and then says one sentence. Or nothing. The one who, when accused or challenged, doesn't flinch and doesn't fire back. Just looks. Just waits. That stillness communicates something no argument can. I don't need to win this conversation because I'm not threatened by you. That is devastating to someone trying to get a reaction. The challenge is a hook. If you bite, they have leverage. Pull the line, keep pulling, see how far you swim. If you don't bite, the hook is just hanging in the water. Useless. And they're standing there holding it. What silence does specifically is force the other person to sit with their own move. When you respond immediately, with defensiveness, explanation, or even a sharp comeback, you give them something to work with. The exchange continues. You're engaged. But when you go quiet, when your face stays level and your posture doesn't change, they're alone with what they just said. And in most cases, what they just said doesn't hold up very well without an audience reacting to it. Machiavelli framed this in terms of power being perceived before it's exercised. A ruler who constantly explains his decisions to his court is a ruler who has handed the court the right to evaluate him. The moment subjects believe they are your judges, you are no longer the ruler. You're a defendant. You don't have to be a ruler to apply this. You just have to stop putting yourself on trial in conversations that were never a court to begin with. ## the art of the unmoved face. Emotion shown in the wrong moment is currency handed to the wrong person. Not because feeling things is weak, that's a child's understanding of Stoicism, the kind that produces cold men who end up alone and brittle. Feeling things is human. The point is the audience. The point is who gets to see it. When someone disrespects you in a meeting, the anger you show is information. It tells them exactly how much that particular move costs them, and more importantly, what similar moves might cost in the future. If your reaction is visible, large, and immediate, they have calibrated you. Now they know the mechanism. They know the button and they know the sound it makes. Men who've been truly wronged, the kind of wrong that reorients a life, often describe the same experience. The moment they stopped reacting wasn't weakness. It was the moment they stopped performing for the person who hurt them. And the absence of that performance, over time, was more punishing than any scene they could have made. There's something that happens in the nervous system of someone who was expecting a fight and got nothing. It doesn't read as victory for them. It reads as unease. The confrontation they engineered was supposed to discharge something: dominance, frustration, the satisfaction of watching you scramble. When you don't scramble, none of that discharges. It stays in them. It festers. You don't have to say anything. You just have to give them nothing to metabolize. This is a skill. It doesn't mean flatness or permanent emotional withdrawal. It means you learn to choose the room. You bring your full humanity to people who've earned it. To everyone else, you bring presence, steady, watchful, unreadable, and nothing more. Your face in moments of pressure is either a weapon or an open book. Train it accordingly. ## why revenge is usually the wrong move, and what to do instead. Here's where men confuse the lesson. They hear, "Make them regret it," and they think, retaliation. A counter move. Go find their weakness, expose it, strike. That is not what power looks like. That's what wounded looks like. Retaliation that's visibly tied to the original offense announces that you've been holding it, nursing it, planning around it. It tells a whole room, what they did affected me enough to dedicate real time and energy to responding. Regret, the kind that lasts, is not produced by punishment. It's produced by contrast. The man who crossed you needs to eventually stand somewhere and watch you succeed in a way that makes their move look small and self-defeating. Not because you engineered a specific revenge, but because you refused to let the encounter become an anchor, and they didn't. And now the distance between where you are and where they are tells the whole story. This is what Machiavelli meant, buried inside the parts people misquote, about fortune and virtue. Fortune gives men circumstances. Virtue, in his definition, is the internal force that acts on circumstances rather than being acted on by them. The man who wastes months in reactive energy, plotting a specific counter-move against a specific person, has handed that person his attention, his time, and the direction of his focus. That is an expensive tribute to someone who may not deserve a second thought. The real move is unglamorous. It's returning to your work. Building the thing you were building before they interrupted you. Letting the outcome of your actual life be the response. This requires patience that feels, in the short term, like swallowing something sharp. Do it anyway. ## the people who actually need to see you bleed. There's a specific category of person who wants your vulnerability on display, not because they care about you, but because your visible struggle justifies something about theirs. Some of them are family. Some are old friends who've stopped growing. Some are colleagues who define themselves, quietly, in opposition to your ambition. They need you to be struggling because if you're not struggling, their own position requires explanation. These are not your enemies, exactly. Enemies are at least engaged. These are something subtler and more draining. They're the people who read your silence as arrogance, your progress as showing off, your refusal to commiserate as proof that you've changed, gotten cold, lost touch with who you really are. What they're asking for when they push you to explain yourself, to defend your choices, justify your moves, lower the drawbridge, and show them what's happening inside, is not connection. It's confirmation. Confirmation that you're still inside the same range they've assigned you. That you're not actually going to become something they have to renegotiate. You owe them nothing. Not hostility. Not dismissal. Not a scene. Just the clean boundary of a man who has decided that his internal life is not a public resource. Who can sit across from someone who's testing him, smile if he feels like it, say very little, and walk away without the conversation living rent-free in his head for 72 hours. That walk away is not coldness. That walk away is self-ownership. Most men have had so little of it that they mistake it for callousness. It's not. It's the decision that your attention is finite, that your emotional energy is not available to everyone who wants to probe it, and that some relationships simply do not earn access to what you're building in private. ## what they learn when you don't break. There is a very specific education that happens when someone tests a man and he doesn't break. Not immediately. Immediately, they often double down, or interpret the stillness as confusion, weakness, hesitation. Give it longer. Watch what happens 3 months later. 6 months. Watch how people recalibrate around a man who held his ground without spectacle, who continued building while others expected him to spiral, who showed no visible wound from what should have been wounding. People don't talk about it directly. It's not a conscious decision. But something shifts in how they carry themselves around him. There's a carefulness that wasn't there before. A hesitation before the casual test, the throwaway slight, the easy provocation. Because they ran the experiment. They saw the result. And the result was nothing available here. Nothing to grab onto. Nothing to exploit. That's not the reputation you build with speeches. It's not even the reputation you build with one strong response to one strong challenge. It's the reputation built over dozens of small moments where you chose not to explain, not to react, not to hand someone the satisfaction of knowing they found the seam. This is not invulnerability. That's a fantasy, and men chasing it usually become parodies of strength. This is something more practical. It's the slow accumulation of moments where you behaved like a man whose foundation isn't affected by weather. Eventually people stop testing the foundation. They move to softer ground. ## the weight of what you don't say. There's a particular kind of strength that never gets written about because it doesn't look like strength from the outside. It looks like restraint. It looks like letting something pass. It looks, to people who don't know better, like backing down. It's the moment you had the perfect response, devastating, accurate, well-timed, and you kept it. You felt the weight of it in your mouth and you swallowed it, and you watched them fill the silence with more of their own words, digging the hole a little deeper, while you stayed exactly where you were. There's something Machiavelli understood about men who last. Not men who win once, men who remain. The prince who survives is not the most explosive, not the most publicly feared. He is the most consistent. His reactions are not performances. His composure is not a mask he puts on for effect. It's the natural result of being so clear about what he's building that individual provocations are just noise against a longer signal. You can't fake that. You can perform it for a while, but performance collapses under sustained pressure. What you can do is build it. Decide, at the level of identity, not just behavior, that you are a man who does not chase the bait. Not because you're above anger, you're not, and pretending otherwise is its own kind of fragility. But because you've learned what chasing it costs, and you've decided the price is wrong. That decision, made again and again in small moments, becomes a posture. The posture becomes a presence. The presence is what people feel when they're around you, and can't quite name and think about later. It's not mystique. It's just a man who knows what he's doing and has stopped asking for permission to do it. Hashtag after the crossing. You want to know what actually making them regret it looks like? It's not a dramatic confrontation where you finally say the thing. It's not a revenge plot that unfolds over months. It's not even a moment where you look them in the eye and they see something that tells them they made a mistake. It's quieter than that. It's them, somewhere down the road, watching what you've built and doing the math on what they walked away from, what they underestimated, what they tried to diminish when it was still small. It's the recognition that the man they tried to make into something manageable and explainable kept going, kept building, kept his mouth shut at the right moments, and never once came back to ask if they understood what they'd done. That's not closure. Closure is a story you tell yourself when you need the past to be finished. This is something different. It's indifference that was earned by investment in your own direction, your own work, your own compound interest on the energy you didn't spend explaining yourself. The truest answer to anyone who has crossed you is a life they didn't predict. Not performed for their benefit. Not staged for a reaction. Just lived, with your full attention forward, toward whatever it is you're actually here to do. The regret, if it comes, finds them on its own. You don't have to carry it to their door. One question worth sitting with tonight. What would change if you stopped explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand you?